Hi everyone, it's been a while since I have made any videos on here, and yeah, I edited a lot of the ones that I had up, so yeah, I'm back now, and it's something that I really would like to be consistent with, just because I did have a lot of people reach out to me and just either thank me or ask for further advice or just wanting a friend as well. Today I want to talk a little bit about a topic that is close to my heart, and also something that I haven't really spoken too openly about to people in my life unless they are people who are close to me. November 1st, 2018, which was last year, I was officially diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And since my diagnosis, I have really committed myself to healing, to recovery, and also making a promise with myself in that I'm going to give back and that I am going to help people who are struggling in the midst of the disorder, because it's tough and it's, I think, one of the most lonesome disorders that there is, just because it's very, very hard for other people to understand, and that's nothing against anyone else. I mean, it's definitely something that I don't think you are capable of understanding unless you are the person going through it. So I just want to talk a little bit on the topic. I will definitely make follow-up videos more specifically, but this is just going to be like a broad tangent ramble, and just hopefully an informative video as well, whether it's you that's going through it or somebody that you love. I also do want to mention, I'm by no means anyone licensed, or I'm not even done my degree. I'm just giving you the typical disclaimer that is, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm just somebody who's gone through it. I am studying psychology in school, and this will definitely be the alley that I emphasize in my studies, but I'm by no means a professional. So basically, for borderline personality disorder, you have to have 5 out of 9 symptoms. You have to exhibit those symptoms to other people, but also it's internal things that you experience. So I guess I'll go through each of those symptoms and talk a little bit about, I guess, my experience with the ones that I did endeavor, but also just talk about them as a broad topic as well. A lot of people, I guess I should have started by saying this is solely my opinion. This is not, I mean, there is research that does support this, but obviously there's controversy as well. I strongly believe that you have the predisposition to develop the disorder if you are a very sensitive individual. It is definitely triggered by life events or developed through those. A lot of people, actually pretty much all of the cases I've read and research I've done, individuals with BPD did experience some kind of childhood trauma, whether that was neglect, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. One of those was prevalent in their childhood, and I think it strongly is tied to the invalidation of emotions and the inability to really develop your sense of self as a young age. So missing critical developmental milestones. So going back to the criteria, the first one is a fear of abandonment, essentially. I definitely did experience this a lot more before. I'll talk about treatment and just some tips afterwards. First thing on the criteria is a fear of abandonment. This is huge in BPD, and again, I think it strongly relates and is intertwined with trauma experienced by the individual with the disorder. I know for me, I fear rejection very, very strongly, and I would almost do anything I could to avoid feeling that sense of rejection and abandonment. A pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships. This is definitely something I've experienced. The thing with borderline personality disorder is it's really emotional dysregulation. So by that I mean it's the inability to regulate your emotions. When someone with BPD is upset or mad, they're up here when a normal person is here. So a person with BPD, when they're mad, they're all the way up here. It's going to take a village to bring them down. It's very, very tough, and a lot of the time, unfortunately, in interpersonal relationships, that's when the symptoms and I guess the heightening of the disorder, that's where it tends to happen climax. When someone with BPD is in an interpersonal relationship, whether that be a romantic relationship, a close friendship, and say an argument happens, they're going to overreact in the eyes of someone else. But that's really not us overreacting. We really feel that emotion, and that is unfortunately just the strength of the emotion we're feeling. The other thing I want to talk about in this symptom, I'll say, is a lot of the time with BPD it tends to be very black and white. What I mean by that is you have a close friend, everything is going super well, you just have a good friendship, and say you get in an argument, well, it's gonna be like you hate that person. Very black and white. The third one is definitely one of my favorites, and it's because it's one of the symptoms I experienced and still do to an extent very, very strongly, and that is identity disturbance. So just persistent, unstable identity and sense of self. A lot of the time people with BPD explain themselves as chameleons. This was a term I used for myself before I even realized it was so common. So if you don't know what a chameleon is, they change color based on their surroundings to blend in with their surroundings. And the reason this is used as just a way to explain people with BPD is because often, well, I'll just talk about myself for reference. If I was with a group of people that were partiers and outgoing, I would act like that. And then if I was with a group of people who were artists and quiet, bookworms, like I would act like that, you know, skater chick and goth chick and bookworm and all that kind of stuff. It's basically just merging and confining to whoever you're with and whoever you're surrounded by. It's scary to think about, but I used to have this symptom very strongly. I had no sense of myself. I didn't know who I was. I just conformed to whoever I was surrounded by to please them, and that's what I lived my life by. And I would come home, close my door, and just cry because I would be in situations where I knew that wasn't who I was. Even though I didn't know who I was, I knew that wasn't who I was, and I did it anyways because I wanted to feel that sense of belonging. And I mean, I think everyone goes through this to an extent in adolescent years, but people with BPD really have no sense of themselves, and it's just like not until recently that I've finally started to feel like I'm really learning who I am for me and no one else. So the next one is impulsivity in two areas that are self-damaging. For me, I'd say about 2 years ago, I would just spend everything I had. I racked a visa up to its limit, went out, just bought a bunch of stuff, and I would just shop all the time. And it was not money that, I mean, I had because I was working, but one, it was money that shouldn't have been spent. It was impulsive buying. I'd think about something I want, I'd go and I'd buy it. It wasn't done in a healthy way. It was self-damaging. So there was that for me, and I think honestly that's really the only like major impulsive acting that I've indulged in. But also with that, I'm a very impulsive person. I'm better at this now, but before it was very much I'd think about something, I'd go do it, or I'd be doing something, I'd think about something I want to do and I would do it. Like, it was very, very, very just no logical thought process behind anything. And I still have to stop myself and, okay, Jaden, think about this, weigh the pros and cons, write it down, consider it first. It's a constant reminder. But with BPD, this is definitely something that is strong, and it's not so much the act you're engaging in. I know for some people it's unprotected sex or it's reckless driving. I don't know what else, but those are just some examples. But again, it's not about the act itself. It's about wanting to feel something, wanting to not feel numb, wanting to have that gratification, that instant gratification, and to just feel like you're alive. Because with BPD, a lot of the time you feel numb, and I think impulsivity is a way of having the ability to feel something. Next one is, and this is a little bit of a touchy topic, but is suicide, self-harming, any self-indulgent behavior. So unfortunately, and this breaks my heart, and the suicide rate for the disorder is very, very, very high. And you know, a lot of people see that as a coward's way out or an easy way out. But you know, being someone who's experienced this disorder very strongly, and just having gone through a lot of the ups and downs of it, and even of recovery itself, it's fucking hard. And I think it says something that people feel they need to go to that extent because they feel so alone, and they feel they're going through something just at such strength that they can't face it anymore. So yeah, that really breaks my heart. But obviously that is the worst it can reach. Self-harming, a lot of people with BPD do cut themselves, but I also want to mention that self-harming, people think when you say self-harm it has to mean a razor blade on a wrist, but I think self-harming can be a lot of things. When I was in high school, I was drinking all the time, and it wasn't like kids in high school who want to experiment and who are just going through that phase. I was drinking to forget, and I was drinking to feel like I wasn't me, and I was drinking a lot, and just engaging in a lot of things that I would consider self-harm. After that is emotional instability due to a marked reactivity of a mood. Before I got diagnosed, I thought I had bipolar disorder. There's a lot of people who get diagnosed with bipolar that actually have BPD, so there's a lot of misdiagnosis between the two. Basically, the way I usually explain it when people ask is, with bipolar disorder, it tends to be a duration of a couple weeks to a couple months. Those highs and lows are spread apart to an extent. With BPD, it's very up and down. There's no consistency in your emotions. It's very, very up and down, over and over and over and over and over again. The next one is chronic feelings of emptiness. I think this goes hand in hand with, I talk a lot about feeling numb, and by this I mean you don't feel anything at all. I find when I have fallouts relationships, friendships, anything like that, arguments. A lot of the time I describe myself as feeling numb, and by this I just mean an inability to feel really any emotion at all. And this tends to happen when I'm overwhelmed, and I know it's definitely a coping mechanism. I think having chronic feelings of emptiness for people with BPD, it's almost the initiator to the impulsivity, so that wanting to feel something. A lot of the symptoms of the disorder are a vicious cycle, so you need one to go to the other one, but this one causes that one. It's just over and over and over again, and it's really learning to break that cycle and regulate those emotions, which is possible, but I'm not done my list yet. The next one is inappropriate, intense anger, or difficulty controlling anger. People with BPD, a lot of the time, get in a lot of fights, whether that's physical, whether that's verbal. I guess this goes with feeling the heightening of emotions. I think the anger comes a lot from feeling misunderstood. I wouldn't say I really experience anger over any other emotion. I don't really tend to be an angry person, so for me that isn't really something that's been prevalent, but I know that that's one of the criteria, so it obviously is an indicator of BPD. Stress-related paranoid ideation or dissociative symptoms. This is the strongest one I experienced and have experienced my whole life. I have had depersonalization and derealization, which, if you don't know what those are, they're dissociative symptoms. I've had those chronically for about 5 years now. Every single day, feeling dissociated from the world, out of touch with reality. That's something that I have had consistently, for a very long time, since I was in my grade 10 year of high school, and I'm now in my second year of university. It's crazy to think how much time has passed, and it took a long time before I was able to even start working towards my progress. Those are the 9 symptoms on the criteria for BPD. You have to have 5 out of those 9 symptoms to be diagnosed with BPD, and that is according and aligned with the DSM-5, which is what psychiatrists and psychologists use to diagnose disorders. I definitely am going to make more in-depth videos on topics related to BPD, so if anyone watches this and there's something you want to know more about or specifically know about, have any requests, do comment or message me on my Tumblr or email below, which I'll add in the description. The treatment for BPD is something called DBT, dialectal behavioral therapy, and essentially this therapy allows you to understand, regulate, and just really learn to cope with your intense emotions. DBT was created by a woman who did have borderline personality disorder, and it was created specifically for BPD. So in the regulation and understanding of your emotions and working ideally to reach emotional regulation. A huge part of DBT is mindfulness and becoming aware of your thoughts, learning that you need to live in the present moment. Everything else is out of your control, and that's something that's really hard to accept for, I was gonna say people with BPD, but also I think us as humans have a hard time accepting that we're not in control. The therapy is very, very effective. The duration of the therapy differs. DBT is usually done in a group and individual session sequence. You go to a group session a week, and you also go to an individual therapy session. You also get a pager to contact a therapist at all times, just because the crisis rate is very high for BPD. I know that DBT therapy can be very, very, very expensive if you're not referred. Thankfully, and I mean I'm very gracious for this and thankful, but I was referred to a group close to home and therefore it was covered. But if you're someone who doesn't have that opportunity, Googling DBT techniques, there's tons online, tons of books, tons of resources that are free. So that's definitely something that's worth doing. I'll also link below some of my favorite books. I hope this video helps. If you're watching this and BPD isn't something that you experience, maybe it's someone you know, someone you love, or you're just curious, and all I can really say is please just try to be patient. I mean, we're people too. Yeah, we experience negative emotions very, very strongly, but when we love, we also love deeply. When we're passionate, we feel that passion very deeply. The prognosis for BPD is very, very high. Like I said, the therapy is extremely effective. Lots of people with BPD and the majority of people go on to lead very fulfilling lives. Alright, I think I'll stop there for now. Yeah, comment below if there's anything I didn't touch on or any future videos that you'd like me to make.